Confirmation bias is dangerous because it rarely feels like bias. Most of the time, it feels like common sense. You have a belief, you notice facts that support it, and the conclusion seems obvious. But the mind is not only receiving reality. It is filtering reality. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and remember information in ways that support what we already believe. It can affect political opinions, financial decisions, medical judgments, scientific theories, and everyday arguments. The stronger the belief, the more emotional the issue, or the more desirable the outcome, the stronger the bias can become. That is why intelligent people are not immune. In fact, intelligence can sometimes make the bias harder to detect, because a clever mind can build better arguments for what it already wants to be true. The first part of confirmation bias is selective search. People often look for evidence in a way that makes their preferred answer easier to find. If someone believes a product is bad, they may search for complaints. If someone believes it is excellent, they may search for glowing reviews. Both people can honestly say they did research, but they did not perform the same kind of research. They asked different questions. A neutral investigation asks, what evidence would support this idea, and what evidence would weaken it? A biased search asks, where can I find proof that I was right? This is why the wording of a question matters. Searching for why something is true usually produces a very different mental journey than searching for whether it is true at all. The second part is selective interpretation. Even when two people see the same information, they may not process it the same way. Ambiguous evidence is especially vulnerable. A mixed study, a vague statement, or an uncertain trend can be interpreted through the lens of what someone already believes. Supporters focus on the parts that seem favorable. Critics focus on the weaknesses. Each side may believe it is being objective, but both are using prior belief as a guide. This explains why debates often become frustrating. The disagreement is not only about facts. It is about what counts as strong evidence, what counts as an exception, and which uncertainties matter. When interpretation is biased, the same data can make opposing sides even more confident. The third part is selective memory. People do not remember all information equally. Details that fit an existing belief are often easier to recall, while contradictory details fade or feel less important. Over time, this creates the illusion that experience strongly supports the belief. A person may remember every time a prediction came true and forget the many times it failed. They may remember the one rude interaction that confirmed a stereotype and ignore the dozens of normal interactions that contradicted it. Memory then becomes a biased archive. It feels like personal evidence, but it has already been edited by attention and emotion. This is one reason beliefs can become more confident with time, even when the original evidence was weak. Confirmation bias is partly caused by mental efficiency. Human beings cannot examine every question from every angle. The brain has limited attention and limited processing power, so it uses shortcuts. Information that fits what we already believe is easier to absorb. It creates less friction. Information that contradicts us demands more work. It may require rethinking a decision, admitting uncertainty, or accepting that we misjudged something important. That extra cost makes the mind defensive. In many ordinary situations, shortcuts are useful. They help us move quickly through a complicated world. But when the shortcut protects an important belief from correction, it becomes a problem. The mind saves effort today by risking a larger mistake tomorrow. Experiments in psychology have repeatedly shown that people tend to test ideas in a one-sided way. Instead of trying to disprove a hypothesis, they often look for cases that confirm it. This is a weak method because confirming examples are usually easy to find. A bad theory can still have some supporting examples. A false stereotype can still appear true if someone only notices cases that fit it. A poor investment thesis can still look promising if someone reads only optimistic commentary. A better test asks what would have to be true if the idea were wrong. That kind of thinking feels less comfortable, but it is more powerful. Confirmation alone does not prove much unless the idea has also survived serious attempts to challenge it. One major effect of confirmation bias is attitude polarization. This happens when people with opposing views become more extreme after seeing the same evidence. Imagine two people reading a report with both strengths and weaknesses. The person who already supports the conclusion treats the strengths as decisive and the weaknesses as minor. The person who opposes it treats the weaknesses as devastating and the strengths as questionable. Both leave the report feeling validated. The evidence did not reduce disagreement because each person processed it through a different filter. This is common in emotionally charged topics, where beliefs are tied to identity, community, or moral judgment. The result is not just disagreement. It is disagreement that hardens after every new piece of information. Another effect is belief perseverance. This is when a belief continues even after the evidence that created it has been discredited. The reason is that beliefs do not exist as isolated facts. They become connected to explanations, stories, emotions, and past decisions. Once people build a mental model around a belief, removing one piece of evidence may not collapse the model. They may say the original proof was wrong, but the conclusion still feels right. This can happen with rumors, first impressions, business assumptions, and personal judgments. The mind keeps the structure even after the foundation has cracked. That is why correcting misinformation is harder than simply presenting a correction. You may also need to replace the story that the false information helped create. The order of information also matters. The irrational primacy effect describes the tendency to rely too much on information encountered early. First impressions create an anchor, and later evidence is judged in relation to it. In a criminal investigation, an early suspect may shape which clues are noticed. In medicine, an early diagnosis may influence which symptoms seem relevant. In hiring, a first impression may affect how later behavior is interpreted. Early information is powerful because it organizes attention. Once the mind has a possible answer, it starts sorting new details around that answer. Contradictory facts may be treated as exceptions, while confirming facts feel like proof. The first explanation does not have to be right. It only has to arrive early. Confirmation bias can also create illusory correlations, where people believe two things are connected even when the connection is weak or false. The brain is built to detect patterns, but it can overdetect them. If someone expects a relationship between two events, they will notice every example that fits and overlook examples that do not. Over time, coincidence starts to feel like evidence. This helps explain why superstitions, stereotypes, and flawed rules of thumb can feel convincing. People are not always inventing the pattern from nothing. They are collecting a biased sample from reality. The pattern appears strong because the mind has counted the hits and ignored the misses. Without careful checking, a repeated impression can masquerade as truth. The real-world consequences can be serious. A police detective who settles on a suspect too early may seek confirming evidence instead of disconfirming evidence. A doctor who focuses too quickly on one diagnosis may miss signs of another condition. A scientist may unintentionally favor interpretations that support a preferred theory. An investor may hold a losing position because every optimistic signal feels credible and every warning feels biased. In organizations, leaders may ignore problems because they are committed to a strategy. In all these cases, the danger is premature certainty. Once a preferred conclusion becomes the center of attention, thinking shifts from investigation to defense. The person may still gather facts, but the facts are being recruited to protect an answer. Social media can amplify confirmation bias by turning personal preference into an information environment. Platforms learn what people click, watch, like, and share. Then they show more of it. This can create filter bubbles, where users repeatedly encounter views they already agree with while opposing views become rare or distorted. Algorithmic editing does not need to create the bias. It strengthens it. If outrage keeps someone engaged, the system may provide more outrage. If a person watches content supporting a belief, recommendations may become increasingly one-sided. Eventually, the feed can feel like reality itself. A user may think, everyone is saying this, or all the evidence points here, without realizing that the surrounding information has been personalized, narrowed, and reinforced. The antidote is not to pretend we are perfectly objective. The better approach is to build habits that make bias easier to catch. Before gathering more support, ask what evidence would change your mind. Look for the strongest opposing argument, not the weakest one. Treat early impressions as temporary. Separate confidence from correctness. When a belief feels emotionally satisfying, slow down, because that may be when the mind is most motivated to protect it. In teams, invite disagreement before a conclusion becomes official. In research, diagnosis, investing, and investigations, actively search for disconfirming evidence. Confirmation bias thrives in automatic thinking. It weakens when we add friction, compare alternatives, and make room for uncertainty. The goal is not to never be wrong. The goal is to notice sooner. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.